Biden's Equality Act will end the legitimacy of biological sex. It will eradicate biological sex in the name of gender. The party of science, my XY chromosome. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with H.R. 5, also known as Joe Biden's latest move to eliminate the legal recognition of males and females with legislation that would define sexual orientation and gender identity as a protected class. In other words, if this law passes, and you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew who believes marriage is between a man and a woman, your First Amendment rights are now subsidiary to this new bill. If you are a scientist who actually believes that biological sex is gender, there's no difference between those things on the most basic, primitive chromosomal level, then you're also potentially guilty of a hate crime. We're going to literally have to rewrite science textbooks. We're going to really have, what this law will do, it will roll gender and sexual preference, completely arbitrary, into the 1964 civil rights laws, which protect race and other things. This is perhaps the most seismologically big thing that government's done since Obamacare, and no one's paying much attention to it.
Well, I don't think it's actually going to happen because I'm going to be an optimist and hope that the Senate actually has some balls and says men are men and women are women. But it did already. You know what? Because I live in reality. I know where you're going.
Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. All right? I'm just glad that we are able to talk about balls. We enjoy talking about that because in a couple of months they may not matter anymore.
This is true. See, no, optimist here. It's not going to happen. This is nothing new under the sun. This bill has been, the Equality Act, as it's being called, has been put up already a couple years ago in 2019, and then they weren't able to get it through. But it did just pass the House, which, we kind of knew it would happen. On a 226 to 204 vote with 3 Republicans, who are Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, Ketko from New York, and Reed from New York. They broke party lines to vote in favor of it, but 226 to 204, it did pass the House. But again, it has to go to the Senate, and hopefully there are some men with balls and some women with vaginas, or front holes, I guess,
Front holes.
Front holes. We don't know. It actually won't become a law, but all of you, if it does somehow become a law and you voted for Joe Biden, you should have known that this was going to happen because he had set out there on the campaign trail in the first 100 days, we're going to get this Equality Act passed. And he actually, also decided to tweet, and I kind of doubt it was him. I think it was someone else.
Yeah, I don't think he wrote that.
Because he lives in the basement and he doesn't even know what's
Zombie
going on.
Biden's not writing much of anything.
But he had said that, we must pass this because we must be equal, except not.
Somebody wrote a speech in which he once said that gender is the new civil rights of our time, right? And so it's not surprising this is happening, and it's not surprising that his handlers, his managers, the people who actually spoon-feed him are the ones who are writing this stuff down. But this Equality Act, the thing that no one's talking about, and I think that they should, even if you support the Equality Act, is what this does to the Constitution, what this does to the First Amendment. I mean, we're passing these laws, these sweeping bills, and what a tragedy is it that we have a Supreme Court that supposedly 5-4 or even 6-3 conservative, we keep being told, who I don't think, when this comes, when this assault on the First Amendment right to freedom of religion, you have the right to believe, to not believe, you have the right to practice your religion, you have the right to believe what your religion tells you. That's about to go away. The Little Sisters of the Poor, I mean, there was a great interview, right, where they were trying to confirm one of Biden's appointments, and they went after, the Republicans actually went after the appointee, right? You attacked, this was Xavier Becerra, right, out of California, who prosecuted with the full state of the power of California behind him, prosecuted the Little Sisters of the Poor for daring to tell California, we don't believe in having, you can't make us, under our First Amendment rights, provide birth control for our employees. It's against what we believe. Even in California, the Little Sisters of the Poor ultimately won that. And here we are now with all of that about to become moot.
Well, because if this would pass, they can't be little sisters. Now they have to just be little genderless something of the can you even say poor then? Maybe they'll take that away too. But specifically with this Equality Act, obviously as a woman, my main concern is for the females and what that's going to mean for every female, not just the adult one, but especially the children females.
What you've just done, ultimately, for all intents and purposes, is erase the independent category of female. You have erased it. And that means that young girls and young women will be required to share locker rooms and bathrooms and showers with men. They will be forced to watch as more and more men cross over the aisle to win trophies in women's sports that they could never in a million years win based on their own abilities and their bodily performance. They could not do it against other men. They're going to do it against women. This is called progress. And the fact that the feminists are almost silent about this tells you if there's one good thing to come out of this, if there's a silver lining of passing this legislation, for all intents and purposes, feminism is dead. Women refused in the final hour to stand up, feminist women refused in the final hour to stand up at this 12th hour and actually assert the idea that there are women. Women deserve privacy. Women deserve spaces away from men. We've heard for 40 years from rambling, incoherent feminists these kinds of arguments. Patriarchy, patriarchy, patriarchy. But now, because the man with the penis puts on a wig and lipstick, whoosh, they all go quiet.
See, they all go quiet because they've already burned their bras, so they have nothing else to complain about. But maybe now, real women we can recycle that, and maybe someday then I'll get to
with the passage of this bill, there will be no more real women, right?
Burn the bras. Maybe not. Probably not. But again, the other issue that comes along with this that people highlighted that I think is kind of interesting, and I think more people need to highlight, it's not even just girls, you can't compete in sports anymore and you're going to lose your trophies. But what about those? They talk about the battered women's shelter and how the men then can just waltz right in there. I mean, we're talking about serious implications for what could happen to women. Like, not just, I didn't win a trophy, but I lost my life because, it could happen.
Another serious possibility is that white men who are now universally responsible for every evil, right?
True.
To be a white man is to be simply guilty based on generalizations, racial stereotypes, and bigotry. If you have white skin, no questions asked, you're guilty. So what's to stop white men? And I think you should do it. White men, the way to now go from being the scapegoat to the victim is throw a wig on and go to work. Wear a dress once a week. Call yourself a woman. And suddenly, you're not guilty of this. You're immediately exonerated, right? You go from being a bully, a racist, a white supremacist, to the single group in this country most protected, most fawned over, despite the low numbers. You go from being victim for hero. I mean, guys, can you sport a dress once or twice a week to go from being the goat to the hero?
Well, we're going to keep rolling right along here with Congress and the possibility of what's happening with men and women. And we go to Joe Biden's nominee for the Assistant Secretary of Health. Not Secretary of Health, but the Assistant Secretary of Health. Why? Why is that so important? Have you ever been able to even name the Secretary of Health, much less the Assistant Secretary of Health? No. But when that doctor is actually a man who is transgender and now is a woman in his eyes, named Rachel Levine, well, then there is, I guess, discussion to be had. When the confirmation hearing was happening, as Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, by the way, Rand Paul is known to do, he gave some questions to Dr. Rachel Levine. Let's just take a look and then we'll comment.
Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question.
Can you imagine if a Republican candidate did that? A Republican candidate for a serious office. Let's say you had a Republican for the Assistant Director of Health and Human Services who was adamant about getting rid of transgender legislation, getting rid of this made-up issue once and for all by ignoring it, and smugly repeated. You had Mazie Hirano from Hawaii, queen of the luau lunatics, asking the question. And this white male basically repeated, "Oh, Senator Hirano, we all know there's a long history of recognizing that men and women are men and women. It's a simple thing called biology. If you elect me, if you allow me to take this office, I will come to your office with my biological textbook, my 7th grade biology textbook, and be happy to sit down and show you this." Do you think this would fly? What kind of an apoplectic brain aneurysm would the left have?
Oh, yeah. They have Mazie Hirano in office spots, so they already had their aneurysm. Anyway, the simple fact that Levine is Mr. Roboto, and I'm sure saying Mr. Roboto would be offensive.
Domo. Domo.
Anywho, the simple fact that the doctor was able to just say transgender medicine is complex and a nuanced field. It is complex and a nuanced field that changes all the time to whatever you want, whenever you want,
when you
tell me, of course it's a nuanced
When you
field.
tell me your science is nuanced, that's what I want in science.
It's a nuance.
When it's come down to science,
understand it.
I like nuance in science. I don't like right and wrong is so yesterday. I kind of like that nuance. Well, it may work, it may not work. It may be true, it may not true.
Testing.
We don't have a lot of evidence, but who really needs evidence anymore? Because evidence and the empirical method have been dubbed by people like Mr. Levine as white supremacy.
But of course, you, the viewer, you watch this and you think that nominee didn't answer the question, didn't give anything. And yet, who's the homophobic one? Who's getting yelled at and getting all the press attention?
He answered,
Rand Paul, who asked.
Of course, he's a homophobe for even asking the question.
An answer whether or not you think that children can just change their sex.
Well,
that we should allow that.
More than that you're going to allow children who aren't old enough to decide when they go to bed or what they eat. Those children now should be allowed to choose medicine that will completely alter the course of their physiology for the rest of their lives.
Yes, they can do that, but Dr. Seuss, they can't handle
No.
it. We can't, because Dr. Seuss is racist. So our kids can't read Dr. Seuss, but they can choose if their who is a who from Whoville.
Well, and talk about contempt for the government, contempt for the country, contempt for our norms, contempt for the office for which she's running. She just memorized something that somebody else wrote for her. I guarantee you her progressive handlers in the Biden administration simply wrote her that speech and said, no matter how many times he asks you, you just repeat it. And they knew the media would cover for it. The attack would be on Rand Paul.
Well,
Rand Paul's the bully.
All their actual media posts they're doing is they're just playing the Rand Paul part and then being like, and Dr. Levine didn't say anything. And next story, you know.
Right.
Well, we sort of kind of have good news on this next story, although the bad already happened and you'll see why. But in Utah, there were a few children, though, who already suffered from having to hear this story. But we have a story, a children's book, that's called Call Me Max. And the teacher at Murray City School District in Murray, Utah, it was Horizon Elementary, decided that they would read this book. Well, the book, Call Me Max, is actually about a biological girl who wants to be a boy. So we're going to have you listen to some of the reading from this book, and then we'll talk about it.
Call me Max. When a baby is born, a grown-up says, "It's a boy," or "It's a girl." If a brand new baby could talk, sometimes that baby might say, "No, I'm not." When a baby grows up to be transgender, it means that the grown-up who said they were a boy or a girl made a mistake. On the first day of school, the teacher called out for our names. Emery, here. Stella, me. I raised my hand when she got to my name. She looked at me, and then at the list of names, and then back at me again. I wonder if she thought my name didn't make sense for me. I felt that way too. Can you call me Max? I asked. Max is the boy in my favorite book. She nodded and wrote it down. I won't tell you what my old name was. That's private.
One of the very first things the little kid wrote, that if a newborn baby, fresh out of the chute, if a newborn baby could only speak, it would tell you that it disagrees with how you've characterized its gender and its sex. So this is how the left thinks, right? That from the moment it's born, it is a fully cognizant adult capable of making decisions and reason. And the only thing the poor little darling can't do is speak. That if you could just find a way to teach language to that little 1 day old, it would start eloquently expressing its feelings to you. This is what they actually think. Meanwhile, 1 day and a half ago, it was a clump of cells that mama could have murdered. This is the kind of nonsense you get with all of this stuff. You know, the reality is, if that 1 year old, that 3-month-old could talk, it wouldn't tell you anything. It would just goo and gah all over you.
That's some imagery coming out.
Goo gah.
Coming out the chute, as Dr. Duke calls
Well, but
it.
I can't call it. I can't gender it, right? Shoot is a gender neutral word.
But coming out, there's anyway.
If there are front holes, there have to be chutes, don't there?
No. Let's talk about the positive, though. So this book was read at that elementary school, and it was supposed to be part of a reading program, but they actually nixed the program. So yay! Not as many kids now will have to hear about Call Me Max anymore. But this reading program that they had was meant to introduce children to more diverse and inclusive literature. Well, the book actually wasn't approved, so the teacher took it upon herself to do it. According to the Associated Press, the book, as you saw, starts talking about, how the kid doesn't identify with the roll call name. But Murray School District spokesman Doug Perry said that students in the class then began asking questions. Because, wow, I wonder, the kids could have been confused as to what the heck is going on in this book. And so one was specifically about puberty, according to Perry, and the teacher hadn't read the book before. That's how we prep now, teachers. The teacher had not actually read this book before reading it to the students, and so the teacher then in the classroom had to kind of deflect on the questions. And wow, the book is confusing, the teacher's confused. What do you think the kids are going to be?
This is the problem, and I'm sick to death of hearing about how our poor teachers, they're just doing what they're commanded to do. We saw this with librarians too, the degree to which individual teachers are taking it upon themselves to go way beyond the liberal policies of these schools and to drag this stuff in. And how do they get this into the curriculum, Mom, without you knowing? In the story, it tells you what they're doing. They get equity bundles in the library, so nobody knows what's in them. They get equity bundles of books, right? So they get whole packets of books, and there are, 12, 13, 15 of these books, all
38.
on a particular, how many?
This one is 38 specifically.
38 books in the bundle. And they're not listed by title because then moms and dads would freak the hell out. They're just equity bundles. And as the representative says, the equity book bundles, this began in the fall. Under it, an elementary school is given a copy of the 38 books on a district's list. The list was curated by Vanessa Job, a vice principal at Horizon Elementary, where the program started. It includes works by diverse authors, including Ibrahim Kendi, and meant to encourage educators to incorporate stories into their lessons. So at the youngest age, when kids get books read to them, they're going to get books from the bundle. The bundle's going to be completely political, all one-sided leftist garbage, and as a mom and dad, you have a hard time locating this when you're assessing the class from outside because they're part of bundle. And who would see the word equity bundle as a bad thing?
Well, and you had said that it's Ibram X. Kendi. Maybe you've heard that with the X in there because you always got to put the X in there. The Ibram X. Kendi, is all about everything dealing with race because he's black and he's a professor, and so he knows everything, and so everything that he says is the gospel truth for what he thinks only. But obviously we have to have everything for him because Black
Well,
Power.
there's a problem here, though, because the school said the book was not approved, quote unquote, and so therefore it was canceled. But you have a representative who says, quote,
Well-
anything in our libraries is fair game
So-
for teachers to use right now, including many books that are in the bundle program. And that word many confuses me.
See, I think what happened here is it's Utah, and so they want to be woke, but not too woke. So when they get called out for being woke, then they're like,
No,
it's
which I
Utah.
think on the other side, you've got a bunch of liberal teachers in Utah who want to be very woke and think they can hide it from parents.
This is true.
They weren't able to do it this time. But again, look at what she said. Anything in our libraries is fair game for teachers to use, which means none of this should have had to have been approved, but the book was suspended because it wasn't approved. So what you've got here is a covert operation in the public schools. We've seen this across the country. Despite what the district says, despite what the policies are, teachers more and more are bringing in more and more radical things because they think they have this kind of sociological power over your kid. The district, it's not just mom and dad be damned. It's the district be damned. If they're not going to go far enough, we teachers will sneak our own radical curriculum and we'll teach it to your kids. And it's much easier to apologize after the fact than to ask permission.
It's time for some real education. On one hand, we have Dr. Seuss. On the other, we have Dr. Duke. Dr. Duke, talk about Dr. Seuss.
Well, it is staggering watching what's happening to Dr. Seuss. Even the Dr. Seuss Trust, the people in charge of the rights for the books, ran to the cameras yesterday to say how we're banning 6 books from publication. We're going to make them go dark because there are images in there that may not be appropriate to the lived experience of children today. I got news for you. The lived experience of children today, no one was ever a sneetch. There's no such thing as a Lorax, and the Cat in the Hat never came to anybody's house. What are you talking about, lived experience? It's complete fantasy literature. Here is my little jingle. I've read it this is the 4th day in a row. Very Seussian. They may can him and pan him, but the tykes always know that silly old Seuss is a friend on the go. You can twist him in knots and lie about his plots, or cancel his sneeches like race-baiting beaches, but Seuss will endure, despite race pimps for sure. So if truth is what you seek, join us for Seuss all this week. And this is the kind of quote from Dr. Seuss that progressives now say is not acceptable for kids to hear. He said, quote, "You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own. And you know what you know, and you are the one who will decide where you go." That's beautiful, but it's not acceptable. Now the police state, the big daddy nanny police state, will decide where you go. None of this liberty and freedom for you.
All right, if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club, and we're going to send you our signature tumblers, just a little thank you. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. And just a quick reminder to please download our brand new Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project on your smart device, and please allow for notifications once you download it.
And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay sneeches, beaches.